Hello and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Understanding the new vSphere 5 vRAM pooled pricing. In this lesson, I'll start off with why the new vSphere 5 vRAM pooled pricing is so important to you. I'll cover the three major changes with vSphere 5 licensing before I show you vRAM pooled pricing in action. From there, I'll cover how the vSphere 5 vRAM entitlements work, and I'll show you the requirements that you'll need to provide to access your new vRAM pooled pricing reports. We'll cover the vSphere 5 License Validator script, and I'll show you how to use the new vSphere License Advisor. We'll end the lesson with the 4 ways to reduce your vRAM pool utilization. So with that, let's get started. So why is vSphere 5 vRAM pooled pricing so important? Why should it be important to you? Why should you even care? Very likely, you're a VMware administrator and you don't spend a lot of time looking at the price tag for VMware vSphere. But vRAM pooled pricing that's new in vSphere 5 is a significant change to vSphere licensing, and in some versions of vCenter, it could even prevent you from powering on a virtual machine. It may or may not significantly affect the price tag for future implementations of vSphere 5, and it may even cost you more money when you choose to upgrade from vSphere 4 to vSphere 5. What it does is it places a soft limit on the virtual machines when a pool-wide limit is reached with vSphere Standard. What vRAM pooled pricing does is it gives you a vRAM entitlement for every license of vSphere that you purchase. All those vRAM entitlements are pooled together into one big pool. And then every virtual machine that you power on, the configured vRAM on that virtual machine is subtracted from that pool. If you run out of vRAM from that pool, you're actually violating your end user license agreement. So there's really a soft limit on the virtual machines when you exceed your pool-wide limit if you're using vCenter Standard, which most companies out there are using vCenter Standard. So there's a soft limit, which means that if you actually exceed the pool, you won't be immediately prevented from powering on that next virtual machine or from exceeding the pool. But you will be violating your end user license agreement, and that's very important. That means that your company is legally obligated to purchase more vSphere licenses even before you power on the virtual machine. Now, on the other hand, if you're using vCenter Foundation and you're using vSphere Essentials or Essentials Plus, you'll actually be prevented from powering on a virtual machine if you're going to be exceeding the pool. And this change should affect how you provision virtual machines. You don't want to now over-provision virtual machines virtual RAM, because all the over-provisioned RAM is just wasted RAM that's being subtracted from your vRAM pool. And by wasting that RAM, you would eventually run out of virtual RAM from the pool, which would mean you would have to pay more and purchase more vSphere licenses. If this is still fuzzy to you, here's a quick 3-point summary about how this works. vSphere is still sold on a per CPU socket basis. So not the number of cores in the socket, but the actual physical CPU socket, the physical chip that's going into that server. So if your server has 2 sockets and each socket has 4 cores, the cores really don't matter. It's the number of physical sockets. So you would need to buy 2 vSphere 5 licenses because you have 2 sockets on that physical server. That really hasn't changed. What's changed is that each vSphere edition now comes with a vRAM entitlement, and that entitlement for virtual RAM is pooled by vCenter based on each version of vSphere that you purchase. So it's in your best interest to purchase all the same version of vSphere because you'll have one vRAM pool instead of multiple vRAM pools. Another change with vSphere 5 is that the vSphere Advanced Edition is now gone, and vSphere CPU core and physical RAM capacity limits or restrictions per host are also gone. So it benefits you to buy servers that have more and more cores per socket. You don't have to pay anything extra for those, and vSphere is going to support those really indefinitely. And before we move on, I should point out that don't think that this means that you need to scale out with your number of servers instead of scaling up. This doesn't prevent you from scaling up, and it still may make huge financial sense to scale up. But you just have to do the math yourself. And when I say scale up, I mean purchase a server that has more and more RAM and more CPU sockets, basically consolidating into fewer physical servers. Yes, you may have to buy multiple vSphere licenses for one physical server, maybe that just has 2 sockets. You might even have to buy 10 licenses, let's say, because you need more and more VRAM because maybe that server has 256 gigs of RAM or maybe even 512 gigs of RAM. Physical server socket, core, and RAM capacities are just increasing faster, honestly, than most people can keep up. So again, three major changes. vSphere is still sold per CPU socket, Advanced Edition vSphere is gone, and the core and physical RAM capacity restrictions are gone, and each vSphere edition now comes with a vRAM entitlement. That vRAM entitlement is going to be pooled together to create a vRAM pool, and then the configured RAM from every virtual machine that you power on will be subtracted from that pool. Now let me offer some further clarification on what configured vRAM is. When you go and you edit a virtual machine's properties, or you go and you create a brand new virtual machine, for example, the virtual machine that you see here, and you go in and you configure the amount of virtual RAM for that virtual machine, the memory size is the actual configured VRAM on that virtual machine, and that's the amount of RAM that's being subtracted from the VRAM pool. So again, you don't want to over provision the virtual memory on a particular virtual machine or all your virtual machines. You don't want to just use a flat template or the same template for every virtual machine. You really need to analyze, with this new change in vSphere licensing, the amount of RAM that's being used by each virtual machine, and to tweak the VRAM configured on each virtual machine down as low as possible to conserve the now finite virtual RAM that's available in your VRAM pool. So here's some key VRAM concepts thanks to a graphic over at VMware.com. Each vSphere 5 processor license comes with a certain amount of VRAM entitled. All of your vSphere 5 processor license VRAM entitlements are pooled together. That's the number 2 on the slide there. They're pooled together, and that's the amount of RAM that you have entitled to you. Then the total of all the configured virtual RAM on all of your virtual machine is pooled together to come up with a consumed RAM number, and then you're in compliance with your end user license agreement if your consumed RAM is less than your pooled virtual RAM entitlement. So you may now be wondering, well, how much VRAM am I entitled to with each vSphere license that I purchase? Well, let's start with the free edition, just for comparison's sake here. vSphere Hypervisor Free Edition, which used to be called ESXi Free, is entitled to use 32 gigabytes of RAM per physical server. So it doesn't matter how many CPU sockets you have, you're not paying anything for it. You can just go up to 32 gigabytes of RAM. But then when you get into the paid vSphere licenses, we'll start with vSphere Essentials and Essentials Plus. Each of those are entitled to 32 gigabytes of RAM per vSphere CPU socket that you purchase. So every vSphere license that you purchase is still per socket, and then 32 gigabytes of RAM is entitled to you for each of those vSphere per socket licenses. With vSphere Standard, again, the same 32 gigabytes. With vSphere Enterprise, it's now 64 gigabytes, and with vSphere Enterprise Plus, it's 96 gigabytes. In the past, vSphere Enterprise Plus was the only edition of vSphere that had an unlimited physical RAM restriction per server. But now these are actually vRAM restrictions. They're not physical RAM restrictions. So you can have as much physical RAM as you want on a server, but you do have to pay for the amount of vRAM that you power on for each of the virtual machines pooled across your entire virtual infrastructure. And I'll be talking about ways to maximize that at the end of this lesson. So again, I want to reiterate that vSphere 5 is still sold on a per CPU socket license, or even in kits. They have vSphere 5 kits, and each edition has a specific VRAM entitlement that will be pooled per vCenter per version of vSphere. Now there's a new version of vSphere that you need to be aware of, and it's called vSphere Desktop Edition. And this isn't something that you actually install on your local desktop. This is a fully functioning version of vSphere that has the same advanced features of vSphere Enterprise Plus, but it's licensed differently, and it's just for people who are using VDI. Could be VMware View, or it could even be Citrix Zen Desktop. So you purchase vSphere Desktop Edition based on the number of VDI users you have who are using vSphere for their virtual desktop infrastructure. So it's a very unique way to purchase vSphere, because it really doesn't matter how much VRAM you have configured on these running virtual machines. You're just paying per VDI user. You should know that based on the end user license agreement, you cannot, however, use vSphere Desktop Edition to run just standard virtual machines, virtual servers that you would otherwise run in the traditional versions of vSphere. All right, so those are the different vSphere 5 vRAM entitlements. Now let me talk about some changes to the vSphere 5 vRAM entitlements. These changes occurred after the initial July 12 announcement of the VMware Cloud Infrastructure Suite, of which vSphere 5 is a part of. When that initial announcement was made on July 12th and vRAM pooled pricing was announced, that vRAM pooled pricing announcement really overshadowed the many advanced and amazing features offered by vSphere 5. After listening to their customers for a few weeks, VMware announced that they were making some revisions to the vRAM entitlements even before vSphere 5 was available and shipping. So on August 3rd, they announced these updates. They announced that the vRAM entitlements would be increased, and I've actually reflected that already in the previous slide where I covered each of the different versions and what amount of vRAM they were entitled to. So the vRAM entitlements were significantly increased, and then they're capping the amount of vRAM that's counted per virtual machine at 96 gigabytes. So part of vSphere 5 was this monster virtual machine that could have up to 1 terabyte of configured vRAM. Well, everybody said that was great, but they were also estimating that the cost in vSphere licenses would be something like $40,000. So the cool thing that VMware announced on August 3rd as part of these revisions is that each virtual machine can use no more than 96 gigabytes of vRAM out of the vRAM pool. In other words, you could configure a virtual machine with 1 terabyte of vRAM, but it would only be consuming 96 gigabytes of the vRAM pool. So this is a great thing for people who are interested in virtualizing their Tier 1 applications. The third thing that VMware did is that they are calculating the vRAM pool usage based on a 12-month average of the configured RAM rather than a high watermark. So you should only be alerted, or it may just be that you're only violating your end user license agreement if your 12-month average of configured vRAM is exceeding your vRAM pool entitlement. And I really want to applaud VMware for listening to their customers and making changes to their licensing model so quickly. So how do you view how much of your virtual RAM pool is being consumed? This is a great question, and I wanted to find out the answer. To do this, actually, the only way today, and I'm sure there will be other ways in the future, but the only way I found today at the time that vSphere 5 is being released is that you can view this inside the traditional Windows-based vSphere client. You go into your vSphere client, you go into licensing, and then into the reporting tab, and there you'll find a report that looks similar to this. So it's a report where you can view what percentage of your vRAM entitlement is being used by your powered-on virtual machines across your virtual infrastructure. However, to use this, you have to go and install the vSphere web client server. Most likely that would be done on your vCenter server. It's included with vCenter. It's not something you have to purchase, but it is a Windows service that just sits there and runs and provides really your vSphere client in a web version. However, you cannot view this report through that web-based vSphere client, but you have to have the vSphere web client server piece installed in order to view the report in the Windows-based vSphere client. I know this is very confusing. In this lesson, I'm not going to show you how to install the vSphere web client server piece because I cover that in my other lesson on using the vSphere web client. I show you how to install the server, and then I show you how the web client works and all the cool things that it does. But that has to be installed in order to view this report. So now let me go over to my vSphere client and I'll show you this report in action. I want to give you a caveat ahead of time that I don't have very many licenses of vSphere 5 or vSphere 4 to really make the report look useful, but I encourage you to try this out on your own vSphere 5 infrastructure to see what the report looks like for you. Here's my Windows-based vSphere client, and I've already connected to my vCenter server. To view the vRAM pooled pricing report, you simply go into Licensing, here underneath Administration, and by default you'll be on the Management tab, and then go into the Reporting tab. And it's here that you'll normally see an error message if you haven't installed the vSphere Web Client Server piece. Now, I've already done that, so this is a very basic report that just allows me to view my vSphere 4 and vSphere 5 licenses that are contributing to my pool, whether I'm exceeding the threshold or exceeding capacity. I can also click on these licenses here to get a little bit more information about the number of licenses I have. I can also change the time period here to show a year-to-date, 1 month, month-to-date, or custom report. There's my month-to-date report, but it really hasn't changed very much. So that's how you view the utilization of your new vSphere 5 vRAM pool. Now let's go back to our slides and let me show you some other tools related to vRAM pooled pricing. Another tool that'll help you with your vRAM pooled pricing is Alan Renouf's vSphere 5 License Validator script. Alan is well known in the VMware community for his Power CLI book and his Power CLI presentations at VMworld. Now he works for VMware, and he developed this very cool Power CLI script called the License Validator. This is an example of what it looks like here. It outputs an HTML report that gives you a very detailed information about your vSphere 5 licenses, the different pools that are available, the amount of capacity that you have, and the amount of capacity that's in use. Let me show you what his website looks like where you can download the script yourself. This is Alan's website, virtualal.net, and you can just really go to Google and Google the vSphere 5 License Validator script. If we scroll down here, he has a quick overview of what vSphere 5 licensing looks like now. And then he shows you how to use the script. He's got a video here on how to run the script, and then he's got sample output of what the script actually looks like. At the bottom down here, he shows us where you can go and actually download the script. So I think this is a very cool and free Power CLI tool that can help aid you in the administration of your new vRAM licensing pool. Moving on, another free tool related to vRAM pooled pricing is the new vSphere Licensing Advisor. This is a free tool from VMware that advises you on your vSphere license usage, and it's really kind of an upgrade tool that allows you to plan out the number of licenses you might need if you're moving from vSphere 4 to vSphere 5. But even if you've already moved to vSphere 5, I've found that running it is very informative. It's really a tiny Windows installation that connects to a single vCenter server. However, you can use a text file to import multiple vCenter servers to be analyzed all at once. It doesn't recognize multiple vCenter servers in linked mode automatically, so that's why you have to import a list of your vCenter servers using a text file. It does require that you have the Java Runtime Engine or the JRE already installed before you install this tool, and the tool does offer the ability to export data. It exports a really nice Excel report. This is what the tool looks like. This is actually a graphic from VMware.com, the VMware vSphere License Advisor. And as you can see on the top here, you can add vCenter servers. You can export data from this tool to a CSV. It shows you the different pools that you have across the top here. And if you're within the end user license agreement or within your entitlements, you'll see a percentage there in green. But if you're exceeding that, that percentage will be in red with an explanation point next to it. It gives you detailed usage below, where it breaks down the number of pools, the amount of vRAM that's available, and the amount of vRAM that's being used. You can actually expand out each pool to see each of the virtual machines in that pool and which virtual machines have what RAM configured and how they're taking away or consuming the vRAM pool. I've run the tool over in my vSphere 5 lab, and let me show you very quickly what it looks like. Alright, so this is the new vSphere Licensing Advisor, and very quickly you just log in just like you would the vSphere client. And notice there that you can upload a file that contains multiple vCenter servers. I'll just click Login here. And when you first log in, you always get this message about the vSphere Licensing Advisor, and it gives some information in here about what the tool does and does not do. Again, this tool doesn't understand if vCenter servers are in linked mode, and it doesn't add those calculations together from multiple vCenter servers unless you do it manually with the file. It does, however, support the new vRAM entitlements announced after August 3rd, as well as the 96 gigabytes per virtual machine cap that a virtual machine can actually subtract from the pool. So I'll click Close here, and if we expand this out, we can see I've got a vCenter server. I can see the percentage of vRAM that's being used from my license. I can actually double click on that, and it tells me the virtual machines that are running underneath that vCenter server that are actually powered on, the amount of vRAM they have configured, their uptime, the host they're running on, the version of vSphere, their IP address. You can even go in here and do some more advanced filtering, like I can do a filter right here, which virtual machine is using, let's say, more than 3 gigabytes of vRAM, and it shows me which of those virtual machines are actually using more than that. That would be a great way to find virtual machines that are using a lot of vRAM, maybe more than 8 gigs. You could do a search there or a filter. I could change my display settings here to also count virtual machines that are suspended, or even count virtual machines that are powered off. There you can see I've got some virtual machines that are powered off, and now those virtual machines are being shown here in the list. So I can go back here to the top of the tree. I can actually clear out all of my filters, and of course I could export this to a CSV if I wanted to. I'll just put it on my desktop, say save there, and then let's go ahead and open up that CSV with Excel. And here we go. This is our CSV export from the new vSphere license validator tool. It shows me my different editions of vSphere that I have licensed, my different vCenter servers, the amount of vRAM that I'm entitled to, amount of vRAM that's being used, each of my different virtual machines, their power state, and how much virtual RAM they're using. I think this export would be very useful for large enterprises who have multiple editions of vSphere and many ESX hosts and virtual machines. Now that we've checked out the new vSphere Licensing Advisor, let's go back to our slides. Now that you understand what the new vSphere 5 vRAM pooled pricing is and how it's going to affect you, what are some ways that you can reduce your vRAM pool utilization? Well, the first thing you can do is to right-size the memory on each of your virtual machines. Make sure that you're not just allocating some abstract amount like, oh, I'll just give every virtual machine 8 gigs or 6 gigs or 4 gigs. You need to really find out what applications are in those virtual machines and really figure out how much RAM do they really need so that you're not over-provisioning virtual machines. You can power off virtual machines that are unused. That's a very easy way to save on your vRAM pool utilization. You can understand the application memory utilization of the applications inside those virtual machines and maybe find ways to reduce it. Maybe you can talk to the SQL admins and see if they really need as much RAM as they're pulling with their applications out of that virtual machine. And then finally, you can remember that all hosts in your enterprise with vSphere licenses count towards the pool. So that includes VMHA hosts who are just in standby mode, or even remote servers if you're using vCenter linked mode. And then finally, don't forget that vSphere licenses are still sold per socket and not per core, and they're not sold just solely based on the amount of vRAM that you want. And you can't purchase just a vRAM upgrade pack. You still have to purchase a vSphere license with a specific entitlement. And this is a great time to consider implementing chargeback to charge your groups or divisions of your company who are using virtual machines and applications that are really hogging the most memory. It's a very easy way now to put a dollar amount on a vSphere license, see how much RAM you're getting entitled to for that vSphere license, then see how much RAM each of the virtual machines is using, and then charge those divisions back, or really give them a dollar amount that shows how much that virtual RAM is costing the company. And then finally, standardize on the same license of vSphere across the board, because you're going to have a separate pool for every edition of vSphere that you're using. So you want to have as few editions as possible. Most likely, or ideally, you're going to try to get down to just one edition of vSphere. And that brings us to the summary for this lesson on understanding the new vSphere 5 vRAM pooled pricing. We started off by covering why vRAM pooled pricing is so important to you. Maybe you're a VMware admin and you don't look at pricing a lot, but honestly, you need to pay attention to vRAM pooled pricing because the amount of RAM that you configure on every virtual machine is going to suddenly affect how much your company is obligated to pay VMware for vSphere licenses. We covered the three major changes with vSphere 5 licensing. And then I showed you vRAM pooled pricing in action. You saw how configuring a virtual machine's RAM is actually what subtracts from the pool. You saw the graphic of the pool and how all the virtual machines that are powered on, their configured RAM is aggregated together and then subtracted from the amount of RAM that you're entitled to for each edition of vSphere. You saw the vSphere 5 vRAM entitlements, not only the entitlements that were announced on July 12th, but also the entitlements that were revised and later announced on August 3rd. From there, I covered the requirements to access vRAM pooled pricing. You saw how you need to install the vSphere web client server piece to be able to view the reports in the vSphere Windows client. I covered the very cool vSphere 5 license validator script from PowerCLI guru Alan Renouf that's going to aid you in administering your new vRAM pools, and then the new vSphere License Advisor, a Windows application to help you in the upgrade process. Finally, I covered 4 ways to reduce your vRAM pool utilization or make the most out of your vRAM pool entitlements. Thanks for watching this lesson covering understanding the new vSphere 5 vRAM pooled pricing.